Today, almost all militaries depend on space satellite support system for communication, for navigation, for navigating of weapon systems, for example, a ballistic missile or an intercontinental ballistic missile. Also in terms of moving troops in difficult terrain, so you use GPS. In a sense, there is already a great contribution of space for such military capability. And in the future, what we can look forward or kind of anticipate is that countries are going to also establish presence in cislunar space, which is the space between the Earth and the Moon, because of the race to access lunar resources on the Moon, as well as deep space. Already the US has a very advanced military space support system, including establishment of a separate military service, which is the US Space Force. You have China, which is also not far behind, also have established a People's Liberation Army Strategic Support Force, is talking about establishing military presence and space domination in cislunar space. India has recently tested an anti-satellite weapon in 2019 and have also established a separate defense space agency. Japan has been currently investing in space situational awareness, also developing radar capability to see adversary satellite. You also have North Korea that is talking about utilizing space jamming systems, for example, in terms of GPS. Iran that just launched a military satellite. So these are the countries that are basically looking at utilizing space for military capability. And in the paper, I point out that given the geopolitical situation with India, there is incentive for Pakistan to invest in space situational awareness and space capacity. US and China and Russia, actually, to a very large extent, they had a very advanced military space capacity and are investing in improving it. And India has recently shown that it's also investing in military space capacity. Countries like North Korea, Iran, Japan are still not there. Iran and North Korea, I would put it in a much lower category in terms of space military operations. And so there is, of course, a great asymmetry. And because of that asymmetry, actually, it's interesting. Ironically, space actually becomes important because of asymmetry, not just at the level of space, but also in terms of nuclear and conventional weapons, right? So countries are investing in space capability. For example, China has an asymmetry with the US in terms of conventional and nuclear weapons. And so what China has recognized is that one of the vulnerabilities of the United States is it's dependent on space. So you then create an anti-satellite capability that creates deep-seated unpredictability in case there is conflict for the United States. We already have the Outer Space Treaty of 1967 that prohibits the placement of weapons of mass destruction in orbit. But the important departure is that nations can use conventional weapons. There is nothing that Outer Space Treaty stops from being utilized. Second, nations have already militarized space. You use space for a lot of military operations, including your intercontinental ballistic missile that passes through space, right? So I think anticipating that future, what we require are two things. One, we require new regulatory mechanisms that build on the Outer Space Treaty, but also basically very clearly states what could be dispute resolution mechanisms, what could be liabilities, right? We have the 1972 Liability Convention, so you can build upon that. The second important thing is that I think there has to be a consensus on clearly demarcating what is meant by militarization and what is meant by weaponization. We tend to conflate those terms, but actually they have very different implications. My paper in the end talks a bit about that, but I think more work and more research is required in that particular aspect.